The 1970s were a revolutionary decade for horror. Filmmakers pushed boundaries harder than ever, breaking away from gothic tradition and embracing raw, uncompromising visions of fear. Horror became bolder, bloodier, and more psychological, giving us slashers that stalked suburbia, demonic possession that shocked the world, and monsters both human and inhuman that forever changed the genre. Tonight, we're counting down the top 10 horror films of the 1970s. Let us know in the comments if you agree with our number one pick and which titles you think should have made the list. Number 10. House, 1977. Few films capture the spirit of experimental horror quite like Nobuhiko Obayashi's House. Released in Japan in 1977, it's a kaleidoscope of surreal imagery, bizarre comedy, and nightmare logic that defies traditional genre boundaries. What begins as a simple story, a group of schoolgirls traveling to a countryside home for vacation, quickly spirals into one of the most inventive and unpredictable horror films ever made. The plot follows Gorgeous, a teenage girl who brings her friends to visit her aunt's secluded mansion. Once inside, the house itself becomes a predator, consuming the girls one by one in increasingly outrageous and imaginative ways. A piano devours a character mid-song, a severed head floats and bites, and even the cat, Blanche, reveals supernatural menace. Obayashi was originally a commercial director, and he brings that sensibility here. Rapid editing, animated inserts, wild optical effects, and exaggerated performances combine to create a dreamlike, almost cartoonish atmosphere. Yet beneath the campy surface lies something darker, an allegory rooted in post-war Japan, with themes of loss, trauma, and the lingering shadow of Hiroshima shaping the film's eccentric energy. House is less about coherent storytelling and more about pure cinematic experience. It's horror as pop art, blending terror with laughter and absurdity with tragedy. Audiences either adore it or find it incomprehensible, but there's no denying its influence. In the decades since, it has developed a massive cult following, celebrated for its originality and fearless disregard for convention. Number 9. Nosferatu the Vampyre, 1979. Werner Herzog's Nosferatu the Vampyre is both a remake and a reinvention. Drawing directly from F.W. Murnau's silent classic Nosferatu, 1922, Herzog pays homage to the roots of horror while crafting something uniquely his own. Released in 1979, it bridges the gap between German Expressionism and modern Gothic cinema, creating a slow, hypnotic vision of dread that lingers long after the credits roll. At the center is Klaus Kinski as Count Dracula, a performance that is at once terrifying and tragic. With his gaunt figure, rat-like features, and hollow eyes, Kinski embodies the vampire as both predator and victim, cursed with eternal hunger yet weighed down by loneliness. Opposite him, Bruno Ganz plays Jonathan Harker, the unwitting traveler drawn into the Count's shadow, while Isabelle Adjani delivers ethereal intensity as Lucy, whose quiet strength makes her the film's moral core. Herzog's direction emphasizes atmosphere over shock. Sweeping shots of mist-covered mountains, decaying castles, and plague-ridden towns create a sense of unstoppable doom. The film moves at a deliberate, dreamlike pace, underscored by Popol Vuh's haunting score, which deepens the feeling that the world itself is succumbing to decay. Unlike many horror films of the era, Nosferatu doesn't rely on gore or jump scares. Its terror lies in inevitability, in watching death seep into every corner of life. By remaking Nosferatu, Herzog wasn't just retelling a story. He was reconnecting horror with its cinematic origins, proving that even in an age of visceral thrills, there was still power in Gothic mood and mythic storytelling. Number 8. Carrie, 1976. Brian De Palma's Carrie, adapted from Stephen King's debut novel, is a horror tragedy about cruelty, repression, and revenge. At its heart is Carrie White, a painfully shy teenager tormented at school by bullies and at home by her fanatically religious mother. Played with heartbreaking vulnerability by Sissy Spacek, Carrie is both victim and powder keg, fragile, lonely, and simmering with a power she can barely control. De Palma structures the film like a pressure cooker. Each humiliation Carrie suffers pushes her closer to the breaking point, while her discovery of telekinesis adds a supernatural edge to her struggles. Piper Laurie's performance as Margaret White, Carrie's unhinged mother, is just as unforgettable. A woman so consumed by religious mania that she sees her daughter's growing independence as a sin to be crushed. The film builds to one of the most iconic climaxes in horror history, the prom sequence. What begins as Carrie's one fleeting chance at normalcy collapses into a nightmare of fire, blood, and psychic destruction. De Palma's split-screen shots and slow-motion editing heighten the chaos, turning a moment of teenage cruelty into an apocalypse of rage. Beyond the spectacle, Carrie is a story about the horrors of adolescence, of being different, of being unwanted, of discovering power in a world determined to crush you. It is as much a tragedy as it is a horror film, with SpaceX's wide-eyed innocence making the devastation all the more painful. Number 7. Alien, 1979. Ridley Scott's Alien is the perfect fusion of science fiction and horror, a film that took the haunted house formula and launched it into deep space. A commercial spaceship crew, responding to a distress signal, unknowingly brings a deadly organism on board, turning their ship into a claustrophobic death trap. What follows is equal parts creature feature and slow-burn suspense, unfolding with chilling precision. The cast feels grounded and real, more like weary blue-collar workers than sci-fi heroes. Sigourney Weaver as Ripley delivers one of the greatest performances in horror and sci-fi alike, her strength emerging gradually as the alien threat grows. Ian Holm, Yaphet Kotto, Harry Dean Stanton, and John Hurt add texture to the crew dynamics, while Veronica Cartwright's Lambert captures the raw panic of facing the unimaginable. The true star, though, is H.R. Giger's alien design. From the grotesque facehugger to the chestburster's shocking eruption and the fully grown xenomorph stalking the ship, the creature feels disturbingly organic, a nightmare born of both biology and surreal artistry. Combined with Scott's meticulous production design, every corridor of the Nostromo feels alive, damp, and hostile. Alien thrives on tension. Long stretches of silence, punctuated by sudden bursts of violence, keep the audience on edge. Jerry Goldsmith's eerie score adds to the sense of unease, but often the scariest moments come from what isn't shown. A shadow in the rafters, a hiss in the dark, the steady pulse of a tracking monitor. Alien redefined both horror and science fiction, proving that the two genres could merge seamlessly. It spawned a franchise and countless imitators, but none have captured the sheer dread of the original, where in space, no one can hear you scream. Number 6. Jaws, 1975. Steven Spielberg's Jaws is often credited with inventing the modern blockbuster, but at its core, it's a masterclass in suspense-driven horror. Loosely adapted from Peter Benchley's novel, the story follows the small town of Amity Island as it's terrorized by a massive great white shark. What begins as isolated attacks escalates into a full-blown nightmare, forcing Police Chief Martin Brody, oceanographer Matt Hooper, and grizzled shark hunter Quint to face the creature head-on. Roy Scheider grounds the film as Brody, a man caught between duty and fear, while Richard Dreyfuss brings sharp wit and scientific curiosity as Hooper. Robert Shaw's Quint is unforgettable, his hardened fisherman persona culminating in the haunting USS Indianapolis monologue, one of the film's most chilling moments. Together, the trio becomes the heart of the story, their uneasy alliance as tense as the shark hunt itself. Spielberg's brilliance lies in what he doesn't show. Mechanical problems with the shark forced him to suggest its presence through music, editing, and point-of-view shots, and the result is far scarier than a constant visual. John Williams's iconic score, two simple notes building into a relentless crescendo, has become shorthand for approaching danger, turning the unseen into pure terror. When the shark does appear, the payoff is monumental. The final showdown aboard the Orca is both thrilling and horrifying, with the vast ocean becoming a stage for primal survival. Even now, Jaws retains its ability to make audiences hesitate before stepping into the water. By blending human drama, technical innovation, and primal fear, Spielberg created a film that's both terrifying and endlessly rewatchable. Jaws isn't just about a killer shark. It's about the fragility of control when nature bares its teeth. Number 5. Suspiria, 1977. Dario Argento's Suspiria is a fever dream of color, sound, and violence, a film where style becomes horror itself. The story follows Susie Bannion, an American ballet student who travels to Germany to attend a prestigious dance academy, only to discover that the school hides a sinister secret. From the moment she arrives, reality feels off-kilter, as if the very walls are alive with menace. Jessica Harper brings a quiet vulnerability to Susie, grounding the story even as Argento drenches every frame in surreal atmosphere. The supporting cast adds to the unease. Alida Valli as the severe instructor, Udo Kier as the cryptic psychiatrist, and Joan Bennett in one of her final roles as the mysterious headmistress. Yet the true characters here are the building itself, and the overwhelming sense of dread that seeps into every scene. Argento and cinematographer Luciano Tovoli shoot in bold, unnatural hues, blood reds, electric blues, and poisonous greens, transforming the screen into a nightmarish painting. Every hallway, stained glass window, and flickering light feels designed to disorient and terrify. The violence is operatic. From the infamous opening murder to the final confrontation, Argento stages each set piece as a grotesque ballet of gore and beauty. Goblin's pounding prog rock score only intensifies the chaos, with its chants, whispers, and relentless rhythms embedding themselves in the viewer's nerves. It bypasses logic, operating like a nightmare where the rules don't matter. Only the feeling of helplessness, of being swallowed by something larger, older, and more sinister than you can comprehend. It's horror as art, and art as horror, a cinematic spell that continues to haunt long after the lights come up. Number 4. Dawn of the Dead, 1978. George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead is more than just a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. It's a sprawling, ambitious expansion that cemented the modern zombie as both a source of terror and biting social commentary. Where the first film trapped its survivors in a farmhouse, this one takes the apocalypse to a shopping mall, turning consumer culture itself into a backdrop for horror. The story follows a small group of survivors, a TV news producer, her pilot boyfriend, and 2 SWAT officers, as they escape the chaos of civilization collapsing outside and fortify themselves inside the mall. At first, the brightly lit corridors and endless goods feel like paradise, a refuge from the violence consuming the world. But the illusion of safety crumbles as the dead break through. Rival survivors invade, and the group begins to fracture under the weight of their own isolation. Romero balances shocking gore with sharp satire. The zombies shuffle through the mall, not just as predators, but as mindless echoes of their former selves, drawn instinctively to the temples of consumerism they once worshipped. It's a critique of modern life that feels as relevant today as it did in the late 1970s. Special effects maestro Tom Savini brought groundbreaking practical gore to the film, making each bite, wound, and explosion of blood both horrifying and strangely exaggerated, like a comic book come to life. Combined with Romero's unflinching direction, the violence hits with both shock and dark humor, creating a tone that swings between bleak and playful. Dawn of the Dead endures not just for its scares, but for its scope. It's epic, grotesque, funny, and tragic all at once, a film that proves horror can carry both entertainment and commentary without losing its edge. The mall becomes a microcosm of society, a place where survival, greed, and the inevitability of death all collide. Number 3. Halloween, 1978. John Carpenter's Halloween is often credited with launching the modern slasher genre, and for good reason. Simple, stripped down, and terrifyingly effective, it takes the primal fear of being watched and turns it into a cinematic nightmare. At its core is Michael Myers, an escaped killer who returns to his hometown of Haddonfield on Halloween night, stalking teenagers with an eerie patience that feels almost inhuman. Jamie Lee Curtis, in her breakout role as Laurie Strode, anchors the film with a performance that is both vulnerable and resilient. As one of horror's first true final girls, Laurie is relatable not because she's fearless, but because she's ordinary, a babysitter trying to get through the night, unaware that evil is watching from the shadows. Donald Pleasance adds gravitas as Dr. Loomis, the psychiatrist who knows Myers' nature better than anyone. Not a man, but pure evil given form. Carpenter's direction thrives on restraint. Wide shots linger on suburban streets and quiet houses, letting tension build in silence. Michael doesn't need to leap out at every turn. He simply exists in the frame, sometimes just barely visible, his mask blank and unreadable. The effect is chilling, making every glance over your shoulder feel dangerous. And then there's the music. Carpenter's minimalist score, written in a matter of days, is one of the most recognizable in film history. Those sharp piano notes and relentless rhythm don't just accompany the action. They drive it, transforming Michael into an unstoppable force. Halloween works because it takes the familiar and makes it terrifying. The safety of quiet neighborhoods, the innocence of teenage life, the comfort of childhood holidays, all are stripped away under the cold stare of the Shape. It's lean, relentless, and endlessly influential, a film that showed how much fear could be conjured with simplicity, precision, and a white mask. Number 2. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre, 1974. Few films have ever captured raw terror like Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chain Saw Massacre. Shot on a shoestring budget in the blistering Texas heat, it feels less like a scripted movie and more like a nightmare caught on film. From its opening crawl to its final frenzied images, it immerses viewers in a world of decay, madness, and pure dread. The story follows a group of young friends traveling through rural Texas, who stumble upon an isolated farmhouse. What seems like an abandoned property reveals itself to be home to the Sawyer family, a clan of cannibals led by the unforgettable Leatherface, a chainsaw-wielding figure whose human skin mask makes him both monstrous and pitiful. What sets the film apart is its unrelenting atmosphere. The low-budget camera work, washed-out colors, and oppressive sound design make every frame feel dirty and suffocating. The dinner table sequence, where the family torments the lone survivor, Sally, is one of the most disturbing set pieces in horror. Chaotic, loud, and deeply uncomfortable. Marilyn Burns, as Sally, delivers a performance of sheer endurance, her screams becoming a haunting soundtrack to the ordeal. Hooper's restraint is also worth noting. Despite its reputation, the film contains surprisingly little on-screen gore. The horror comes from suggestion, from the way the camera lingers just long enough, and from the oppressive sense that everything we're seeing could be real. It's not the blood, but the atmosphere. The bones on the floor, the buzzing of flies, the relentless roar of the chainsaw that sear into the mind. The Texas Chain Saw Massacre is primal fear distilled onto celluloid. It strips away artifice and sophistication, leaving only chaos, brutality, and the sense that once you've crossed into the Sawyer family's territory, there is no escape. It's one of the most harrowing experiences horror has ever delivered, and it continues to echo through the genre decades later. Number 1. The Exorcist, 1973. William Friedkin's The Exorcist remains one of the most infamous and influential horror films of all time. Released in 1973, it became a cultural event, shocking audiences with scenes so intense that reports of fainting and vomiting in theaters became part of its legend. But beyond the sensationalism, it's a deeply crafted story about faith, fear, and the battle for a young girl's soul. At the center is Regan McNeil, a 12-year-old girl who begins exhibiting strange and terrifying behavior after playing with a Ouija board. Linda Blair's performance is astonishing, vulnerable, disturbing, and ultimately unforgettable. Her mother, played with desperate intensity by Ellen Burstyn, becomes the emotional core of the film, embodying a parent's helplessness in the face of something she cannot understand. The priests who come to help, Father Karras, a man wrestling with his own crisis of faith, and Father Merrin, the seasoned exorcist, bring both human fragility and spiritual gravitas. Jason Miller's portrayal of Karras is quietly heartbreaking, while Max von Sydow's Merrin radiates weary strength as he faces a demon he has battled before. Friedkin directs with a documentary-like realism, grounding the supernatural in an everyday world of hospitals, city streets, and quiet homes. That contrast makes the moments of horror, Regan's contortions, her guttural voice, the infamous headspin, feel all the more shocking. Combined with Dick Smith's groundbreaking makeup effects and Mercedes McCambridge's chilling vocal performance for the demon, the film pushes the boundaries of what horror could achieve. Yet The Exorcist isn't just about scares. At its core, it's a story of faith tested by evil, of people confronting forces larger than themselves. The quiet moments, a priest struggling with doubt, a mother begging for help, carry as much weight as the violent clashes with the demonic. More than 50 years later, The Exorcist still unsettles. Not because of shock value alone, but because it taps into universal fears: loss of control, loss of belief, and the terrifying possibility that evil can invade the most innocent of places. It stands as a towering achievement in horror, one that continues to influence filmmakers and haunt audiences around the world. Honorable mentions. The decade also gave us some unforgettable outliers. The Wicker Man, 1973, a chilling folk horror tale of ritual and sacrifice. Don't Look Now, 1973, a psychological descent into grief and dread set against the canals of Venice. And David Lynch's Eraserhead, 1977, a surreal nightmare that still defies explanation. Those were 10 of the most essential horror films of the 1970s, a decade that reshaped the genre with grit, style, and shocking new ideas. These films showed just how daring and diverse horror became during the 70s. Of course, there are plenty of unforgettable titles we didn't include, so let us know in the comments which ones would have made your list. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this look back, stick around as we continue moving forward into the next decade of horror history. And remember, always be kind and rewind, because every movie is someone's favorite.